Okay, I would like to make a video kind of detailing some of the differences between the Senate and the House of Representatives. Now, this oftentimes is confused with people like, what does the Senate do versus the House versus Congress as a whole? So this is actually a document that's in the AP Review Materials folder on Schoology. So you can access this document, but I'd like to go over it really quickly just to kind of give you, again, a little heads up on what some of those things are. Some unique traits about the Senate. It's a little different. They were initially seen as the upper house, probably because they served for 6-year terms, probably because they weren't elected by the people initially. When we first started the country, it was the state legislatures that picked the 2 senators from each state. So your state legislature would pick your 2 U.S. senators. In the early 1900s, the 17th Amendment changed all of that. So now we get to go to the polls and pick our own senators. Every 2 years, a third of the Senate is up for re-election. So that's how that works. There are far fewer rules in the Senate than there are in the House. Because there's only 100 people, they kind of let them go a little more. So that's why you can do things like filibuster. Remember, that's unlimited amount of talking in order to try to get your opposition to modify a bill or change that bill. Obviously your ideal thing would be for the other side just to drop it all together, but at the very least you'd like them to make some changes to make it a little more agreeable for what you're like, what you like. The other thing is about the Senate that's pretty unique is there's fewer people, so you have to have your hands in a few more pots. You have to kind of wear more hats, so to speak. So you're going to dabble in a lot of different subjects. You're going to have to be kind of a jack of all trades, know a little more about a lot of different subjects. So it's education, foreign policy, and agriculture. You're going to have to kind of dabble a little bit more because there's fewer of you. So that's kind of how it works. Now, as far as the unique things that the Senate can do, some other videos are going to touch on some of this a little bit more in depth, but treaties. The Senate has that advice and consent power so they can approve treaties that the president has negotiated. 2/3 of the Senate has to do that. So that's something they take pretty seriously. They also approve presidential appointments, whether that's ambassadors, cabinet secretaries, federal judges / Supreme Court justices. All of those are approved by the Senate. Again, they take that really seriously. Those are pretty big powers the Senate gets to have. If there is an impeachment of a president, of a judge, of another member of Congress, and there is a eventual trial to remove that person from office, that trial is held in the Senate. Okay, the Senate's going to be the one that's going to conduct that trial. It kind of last, and certainly not least, is if there is no clear majority in the presidential election, the top 2 vote getters among vice presidential candidates go before the Senate. Pretty simple. Most votes wins, so 51 votes, and then that's the new vice president. Okay. House of Representatives a little different. They were seen as the lower house, probably because it was directly elected by people. It was written into the Constitution as kind of a lower house. Because it was directly elected by people, they wanted to make sure that those people were responsive, accountable to the people, so they're elected a little more frequently, 2-year terms. Every 2 years, every single person in the House of Representatives up for re-election. That's kind of a big one. There are more rules because of the large quantity of people in the House of Representatives, 435 different members. That means that you have to have more rules. That means limits on how often you can talk. There are no filibusters. That means maybe more closed rule. You can't add amendments to bills when you're debating those on the House floor. Maybe there's a fewer time overall spent debating a certain bill. The nice thing about the House is you can be on fewer committees because there are so many people. You can really divvy the work up. So, for example, I can really specialize on agriculture or energy or taxes or whatever committee I'm on. I can become a specialist in that. I can be really kind of focused on that 1 or 2 topics. You were only on a few committees, so you can focus on those few things to be really good at something. So that's kind of a nice thing. Unique things that the House of Representatives can do. When we talked about how a bill becomes a law, we mentioned you introduce a bill in either the House or the Senate. It really doesn't matter. So where you start. There is one exception. Tax bills. You have to start those in the House. That's pretty explicitly stated in the Constitution. Got to start those in the House. The other thing is impeachment. Impeachment starts in the House of Representatives. So actually voting on if somebody's impeached or not, meaning if there's a formal charge of wrongdoing, that's impeaching. That's done in the House of Representatives. Now, if you want to remove them from office, again, that's the Senate that does that, not the House. So just impeaching somebody's the House. And determining what the punishment is for that wrongdoing is the Senate. So that's the trial in the Senate. Last and certainly not least is if there is no clear presidential winner in the Electoral College, the House of Representatives gets to make the call on who's the president. Now, not quite as simple in the Senate when they select the vice president. In the House, a little more complicated in that every state has one vote. So all the representatives from your state kind of get together, you vote who you want for president. The most representatives, that's who your state's going to vote for. For example, Alaska's got one representative. So they get together in a room by themselves, and that one representative gets the vote for who they want. That becomes Alaska's vote. So if that one person's a Democrat and they vote for the Democrat, then Alaska votes for the Democrat. In Michigan, we have 14 representatives. So let's say those 14 representatives get together in a room, and they vote for who they like, and it's 7-7. That means Michigan loses their vote if they can't come up with a clear winner. So let's just say it's 10-4 in favor of the Republican candidate. That means Michigan would cast their one vote for the Republican candidate. So even though they have 14 representatives, whoever those 14 representatives come up with, Michigan still gets one vote. California, with 53 different representatives, at least present day in 2020, with their 53 representatives, they get into a room and they also have one vote. So again, if it's 48-5, they're still going to get one vote for whoever they decide to vote for. Okay, the presidential candidate with the majority of the states gets to become the new president. So you got to get 26 out of 50 states. Let's just say, because it is among the top 3 vote getters, let's just say that Michigan is a compromise at 7-7. They decide that we're going to go for the Green Party candidate. And a couple other states do that. So nobody gets to 26 votes. That means you got to go through the process again. You might have to go through it 20 or 30 times until you pick out a clear winner. Now, usually what happens in that scenario is some deal will get struck, like, the president maybe contacts one of the reps and say, hey, if you change your vote, you can be my Secretary of State. That actually did happen in a few times, actually, in the 1800s, to sway representatives' votes. So, okay. So those are some unique things about the House and Senate. Like I mentioned, this document can be found in the AP review folder. It's entitled Senate versus House, and feel free to access it whenever you like. If you have any questions on this, just give me a shout, give me a holler. I will be here. Otherwise, I will see you later.